This presentation is meant to serve as a how-to guide for the York County School Division Summer Reading Annotations for 10th and 11th graders. So first, let's get into what an annotation is. An annotation is analyzing a quote to demonstrate that you understand the theme or the author's message. So what is a theme? A theme is the point that the author tries to communicate. So in some books, there is one central theme that the author tries to convey throughout the book. Certainly, there might be multiple themes in a text. So you are looking for the main theme and perhaps some smaller points or themes that the author makes as well. Take, for example, a movie like Disney's The Lion King. There are many themes in The Lion King. Some of the most important are, again, the importance of taking personal responsibility for one's actions. But there are also some other themes, like the power of friendship, the danger that jealousy can cause, and the importance or value of self-discovery. So you as a reader are looking through the text to find quotations that would help you support your idea of the author's theme. The idea of using these reading strategies is to show that you're not just reading the words in the book, but really thinking about how those words make the author's point clear to the reader. The 4 strategies that you are going to be using to complete your annotation and to analyze the quotes are questioning, making connections, determining importance, and interpreting language. Each strategy is slightly different to show that you understand the author's message in the book or books that you are reading. So you as a student are looking through the text to find a quotation that is relevant to the theme, and then you are writing an annotation employing that reading strategy to show how that quotation makes meaning. The next thing we're going to do is to go through each one of the reading strategies. So what are the different strategies? The first strategy is questioning, and it tells you in your instructions in the packet that for this strategy, you are posing a thoughtful question that is looking at, again, determining the meaning of a particular passage. It should be more than a simple plot event or a silly question that has no real relevance in the book. Once you ask or pose that question, you're then going to attempt to answer that question and to connect it to the purpose of the text as a whole. Determining importance is looking for quotations that really illustrate that theme. I like to think of these as t-shirt quotes. For example, when you watch certain pop culture movies, there are certain quotations that stand out as the kind of meaning of the text or the most important pieces. In Harry Potter, for example, when Dumbledore speaks, his pieces try to impart wisdom. Likewise, in The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings, when Gandalf speaks, those are moments where they're communicating meaning. So in determining importance, you're looking for passages that, again, help to explain to readers the significance of the text. What's the theme? Making connections is taking a piece of the text and comparing it to another work of literature. Television and movies are considered works of literature, along with mythology, poetry, short stories, or plays that you have read. This also includes songs. What you're trying to do is to make a connection between the texts, explain the connection, and explain the themes. Are they the same or different? So for example, in a text, you might have a moment of self-sacrifice, and you think to yourself that this moment is similar to the Hunger Games, in which Katniss Everdeen sacrifices herself for her sister. What are both novels showing? Are they showing the value of making that sacrifice and how important it is to put others before one's individual needs? What are these two works doing thematically? What is the connection? So that is making connections. Finally, interpreting language refers to looking at a passage, looking at the surface meaning of the passage, and then investigating the literary techniques or literary language that the author uses to communicate this theme. Pieces that you might look at in interpreting language include things like diction, the word choice. Why does the author use these particular words? Things like similes or metaphors, hyperbole, which is extreme exaggeration. You might use analogies, again, a four-part comparison. You are looking in your interpreting language to give 3 literary techniques that the author uses in that passage and explain how those literary techniques in the passage help to communicate the theme of the work. Notice that all the different strategies go back to the theme or the purpose of the work. Each grade level has different requirements for the annotations. 10th graders are doing 10 quotations and 10 annotations per novel. 2 of the quotations per book have been selected for you by the teacher. You are required to annotate these 2 passages. For the remaining 8 annotations, you are going to find quotations on your own and apply the strategies to write the annotation paragraph. 11th graders are reading 2 nonfiction books and pulling 12 quotations for each selection. No quotations have been provided for you, so you as a student are choosing all 12 of the annotations to do on the novel. As you pull the quotations, please make sure that these are spread throughout the book and not concentrated in the first few pages of the text, or again, leaving out larger significant sections. Please sprinkle these throughout the text, again, making sure that you're covering the breadth of the novel. The purpose of an annotation is to discover the theme. The theme, of course, as we mentioned, is the author's message. So no matter what type of annotation you do, you are going to do the annotation to try to show how this passage contributes to the theme. You're showing how the passage makes meaning and what it shows about the author's purpose. So here are the steps to follow for each type of annotation. The first is questioning. So when you use the questioning strategy, the first thing that you're going to do is to situate the context of the passage. What is going on? In this passage, this character describes to this character whatever it is that they're describing. Okay? Then you're going to pose your question. Your question, again, is something that should go beyond simple plot events or questions like, I wonder what will happen next. Once you pose the question, you then explain the passage using small quotation snippets, and you clearly explain the answer. So again, don't just pose the question. You need to answer it. Finally, the last sentence is going to link what's going on in this particular passage to the theme of the work as a whole. And remember, the theme is the author's message, so it should be more than something like a word like friendship. Friendship is not a theme. What is the message that the author communicates? Here's a sample questioning strategy from the novel Fahrenheit 451. In this, the character Beatty explains to the protagonist why the society is as it is. The society in this particular novel is dystopian, meaning again, it is a society that looks perfect, but really isn't. So in this passage, Beatty notes, for everyone nowadays knows, is absolutely certain that nothing will ever happen to me. Others die, I go on. There are no consequences and no responsibilities, except that there are. But let's not talk about them, eh? You'll note that in the questioning, in citing the quotation, there is an introduction to the quotation that says, again, who is speaking, and then at the very end, there is the author's last name and the page number of the text on which you found that particular quotation. Then, your annotation is going to follow those steps on the previous slide. In this passage, Beatty explains to Montague, the protagonist, the problems of the dystopian society. What is Beatty observing? So this is the question that I'm posing, and then I'm going to explain it. So he shows that the citizens do not care about the effects of their behavior. I'm going to use part of the quotation to explain how I got that meaning. They falsely believe there are no consequences and no responsibilities. The people in the world behave apathetically, meaning they don't care, and Beatty points out that their behavior does produce problems. So through this quotation, Bradbury shows that people must think about the consequences of their behavior and act to make a positive impact on society. So this annotation follows all of the steps. It situates the passage, poses a thoughtful question, explains the answer to that question, and then links it to the theme. This is a sample questioning annotation. For determining importance, you follow many of the same steps. Once you pick a quotation that you believe links to the meaning of the work, you situate the context. What is happening in this particular passage? Then, think on a deeper level what the passage is showing or demonstrating. What is the point that this passage is communicating? Then, just like in the questioning, explain the passage using small pieces or snippets of the quotation and clearly explain what the meaning is that you have selected. Finally, link this passage to the theme of the work as a whole. So you're taking the passage, telling me what's going on, explaining the deeper level or deeper meaning and how you got that deeper meaning through the words, and then linking this particular passage to one of the themes of the work. For making connections, you follow some of the same rules. First, situate the context. What's happening in this passage? Then, explain what the passage is showing or demonstrating, and you might use quotation snippets to explain what that meaning is. Then, you're going to make a connection to another work of literature. Again, a specific connection. Perhaps it's in the characterization of the characters. Maybe, again, it presents a similar occurrence as another novel. But you're going to, again, at the end of this, compare or contrast what the authors do in a particular work. So, for example, in The Maze Runner, Thomas sacrifices himself by going into the maze to save some of his friends. Katniss Everdeen, in The Hunger Games, does exactly the same thing. Both authors show that making sacrifices, even when others believe it is wrong, are correct actions. So again, when we're looking at these pieces, we're always going back to that theme or that meaning. How are these particular pieces similar? You might also use history or popular culture kinds of events, but movies, television shows, and even songs are acceptable. Do not use personal examples, as they tend not to be as deep, nor do they really present a theme. When you interpret language, again, you're looking at how the author uses literary techniques to make meaning. There's no need to define terms like simile. Teachers are aware that a simile uses like, as, or than to make meaning. So in interpreting language, you are explaining the context, showing what is happening in that particular scene or passage. Then, you're explaining what the passage is showing on a deeper level. You must use quotation snippets to explain this, and you must mention at least 3 different literary techniques. Literary techniques are not limited to things like similes or metaphors. You're looking for passages that are important, not just random metaphors and saying, here's a metaphor. You're looking for pieces or parts of the text where the author uses language that is symbolic or metaphorical, or perhaps he creates a comparison. You're looking for moments in the text where the language has a deeper meaning. You're explaining that deeper meaning, mentioning the techniques, and then linking it to the author's point. So what's the theme in this particular passage? So in interpreting language, we're not just picking random similes or metaphors and defining that here is a simile. You're looking for places where the language is symbolic. So for example, in the book The Hobbit, Gandalf often talks about the idea of roads. Roads here are both literal, as in the road that they're taking to the journey, but they're also metaphorical. Roads are the paths that individuals choose in their lives. So through this metaphor, or through the diction, the word choice, what is he communicating? How does this show something about the author's point that he's making? So you always link these literary techniques back to the theme. What is the author displaying? When you cite quotations, so when you pull these quotes to annotate, quotations should have a little phrase to introduce them, like who says that, or if it's narratorial description, you can have the narrator describes, and then at the end of the quotation, you are going to document it parenthetically with the author's last name and the page number on which that quotation is found. Remember to use quotations throughout the book. Do not settle all of the quotations in the first few pages, or again, in like the last few pages. Demonstrate your comprehension through the breadth of the work. Quotations that you pull will be roughly 1 to 4 sentences. Do not quote an entire page of text. Typing that quotation is too terribly time consuming. Simply limit your quotations that you're analyzing to 1 to 4 sentences. It might perhaps be a little longer if the sentences are short, but keep them to a reasonable length. Do not quote the whole page. Here are some examples of what your quotation should look like when you pull it from your text. The character Merceau says, "I don't know." Then, at the very end of the quotation, you are going to have the author's last name, here his last name is Camus, and the page number on which that appears. So, Camus 1. If you have a different text where you have, again, an author describing something, you might have something like the author describes as your introduction. Then you're going to put the quotation, notice that there's no period at the end, the period comes after your parentheses, and you're using the last name of the author and the page number on which you find it in your edition. So when you cite quotes, we're asking students to practice their fluency with MLA citation. MLA citation, again, has an introduction to your quotation, and then the last name of the author and the page number on which that quotation appears in the parentheses. Just some reminders. You are writing these annotations in your best formal language. Formal language means that you should avoid things like contractions, right? Saying can't or won't or couldn't or shouldn't or doesn't. Please write those out. You're also avoiding personal pronouns in your annotation. So in the paragraphs that you're writing, you're avoiding words like I, me, my, we, you, us, your, or our. Anything that refers to you specifically, or you and someone else. And you're also going to avoid using slang in these annotations. You should be using your best language in which to write the annotations. Discuss literature in present tense. That means everything that happens in the novel will be described as in present tense. So the author shows this, or a character says this, or a character does this within the text. Use present tense throughout. It will be very easy to lapse into past tense, as that's how we naturally tell stories. But literature is always discussed in present tense. So the author shows, the author argues. As you're writing your theme, those are excellent ways to state it, that the author shows, the author illustrates, the author depicts the lesson, the author conveys, or the author communicates. All of those are verbs that are used to indicate what the theme or the message is. Your annotation in general is going to be about 4 to 5 sentences, although it might be a bit longer. Follow the steps and do those well. One word of caution: do not plagiarize from online sources. Plagiarism is using other people's words or language without proper citation or attribution. So plagiarizing can include things like word-for-word copying. So if I go on to Schmoop and I find one of their quotation analysis and I copy it into my document word for word, this is plagiarism and can result in a 0 for the assignment. Likewise, using the top 10 quotations on a site is also plagiarism. Using the material that they've selected without doing the work on your own is considered plagiarism. Even if, again, you use their quotation and change the language around a little bit in their analysis, it is still plagiarizing. Although you may consult some of those sources to make sure that your thematic analysis is correct, please do not use those online sources as you write your annotations. There is a fillable template for the annotations available online on both the York County School Division website as well as the school's homepages under summer reading. Use the fillable template to type the quotations with their introductions and the page number and MLA citation, as well as the paragraphs for annotations. Students at York High School will be reading The Stranger by Albert Camus and Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe if they are in the 10th grade. As far as themes are concerned, The Stranger is a novel that follows the character Meursault, and Meursault is an existentialist. An existentialist follows the philosophy that life has no meaning. They do not believe in the same way that most of us do that there is a purpose for existing. Most of us, to complete our purpose, obey certain social rules or expectations. Meursault lives mostly for his own kind of pleasure, as opposed to, again, doing things that are expected by society. Because of this, he seems very strange to the rest of society, and he is therefore persecuted for the things that he does that are very different from other people. Camus himself was an existentialist, and part of what he's doing in the story is to show that society often treats very unfairly those who are different. So throughout the story, you are going to look for examples of where Meursault has a very different philosophy or idea from other people, and how the society is shown to be no more correct than Meursault's philosophy. How does the author show, again, this unfair marginalization of people who are different or who do not conform to the kind of norms of society? The second text that students will read is Things Fall Apart, which describes the rise and fall of a Nigerian tribesman named Okonkwo. One of the problems with Okonkwo is that he suffers from excessive pride or hubris. His pride creates a lot of trouble. So too, however, does the pride of the colonizers who come in to try to impose their ways of thinking on other people. So the author throughout the text is making the argument that ethnocentrism, ethno like ethnicity, ethnocentrism is seeing one's culture as superior or better than others. And he's showing that, again, seeing things from that perspective ultimately causes conflict and disruption and ultimately destruction. So as you read the novels, consider how the works show those particular themes. You are looking for quotations that will help you, again, communicate those moments in the text. So again, where are those moments in the text that help you to communicate the author's purpose or the theme? Where are those aha passages that you can point to and say, I see, this is what the author is doing, and this is why it is important. Here's a sample determining importance from a text that's not part of the summer reading. In determining importance, this is where you are looking at a particular quotation, unpacking it, and explaining how it shows the theme. So here's the quotation that I selected. In The Lord of the Rings, Gandalf says, "Deserves it? I dare say he does. Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them? Then do not be too eager to deal out death in judgment, for even the very wise cannot see all ends. I have not much hope that Gollum can be cured before he dies, but there is a chance of it, and he is bound up with the fate of the ring. My heart tells me that when he has some part to play yet, good or evil, before the end. And when that time comes, the pity of Bilbo may rule the fate of many, yours not least." So I've set up my quotation with who says it, and at the end in my parentheses, I have Tolkien and the page number on which I found that. So in my annotation, the first thing that I'm going to do is to again explain what's happening in this particular passage. So in this passage, Gandalf is explaining to Frodo that he should not judge Gollum too harshly and should not demand his death even though he wants to. He explains that all people deserve a chance to redeem themselves and should be spared, not killed or judged. Then you're going to use quotations that show this. So Gandalf explains that life is not fair when he says some die that deserve life. Since life is already not fair, people should not try to make it more unjust by making judgments or inflicting punishments. Also, he says people cannot know if others can be saved or redeemed. He says the wise cannot see all ends, which means that no one can know whether a person will choose to reform himself or act better. Instead of acting out of anger, Gandalf suggests Frodo give him a chance. He wisely suggests that Frodo should be forgiving and to practice restraint. Then I'm going to link it to the theme. Through the passage, the author shows that individuals can choose to be either good or evil, so people should not act rashly or hurt others because those choices will affect a person's destiny. So there I've encapsulated the theme, or what I think the author is trying to show using this particular example. So when you do your annotations, set up the context, explain that quotation, unpack it, then link it to the theme. Your quotations that you choose should have some relevance to that theme. Some final recommendations. One of the things that you should do is to read the book with the theme in mind. What is it that the author is conveying? Along the way, you might sticky note, right? Just making note of some of those quotations that really help you get to the theme. Places where you really see it very clearly, like, aha, here is where the author is showing me that pride can lead to a downfall, or that hatred can cause negative reactions in society. So look for quotations that provide that moment of insight into the book's meaning. And again, I would sticky note any section that really, to me, seems to show something about that theme. Once you're done doing your sticky notes and reading the book, you need to decide what type of annotation strategy is best suited for that quotation. Remember, you should be using a variety of strategies, and each of the strategies, determining an importance, using a question, making connections, and interpreting language, all of them should be used at least once. Do not rely too heavily on one strategy. Points will be deducted if all of your annotations are questions or all of your annotations are making connections. You should use or distribute those strategies in a kind of fair fashion. Select the best of the quotations that you've tagged with your sticky notes, the ones that you really feel help you explain the meaning of your book. 10th graders have 2 quotations that are already assigned to them. The remaining 8 annotations that you choose should be selected from the stickies. Which ones do you think really help you the best to convey what you have learned from the book, the author's message? For, again, 11th graders, you are choosing all 12 of the annotations. There are no teacher-selected passages. So again, 11th graders should use those sticky notes that they have to determine which ones are in fact the most helpful in determining the author's message. Hopefully this presentation has helped you understand a little bit more about annotations, what to do, and how to do them. If you have any further questions, feel free to contact Dr. Vika Stevenson at the school board office or the teachers from your respective schools for any other questions that might not have been answered during the course of this presentation. Thank you, and happy reading.